Good morning. How are you guys doing? Because it's cold, we just started over again just to get us all awake. You guys doing good today? Yeah, good, awesome. I love Florida normally because it's super warm, right? This is an unusual day. Maybe someone told me Christmas was the coldest day, but I'm not a cold person. You guys, who's a cold person out here? You like it? Okay, a few of you. All right. No. Who likes it warm? Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is as cold as I ever want it to get, ever. And not like, don't last. You know, I lived in California, and it's colder in California than it is here most of the time because it's less humid. So you get some cold days, you even get frost and stuff, and it gets kind of weird. When I was living in California, I lived in Huntington Beach in Orange County, if you're familiar with Orange County, just below LA, but between San Diego. And as I moved, I lived out there for a couple of years, actually, and I have two brothers who live there, too. And one brother lived in Los Angeles, and he lived in Redondo Beach. You know, there's a bunch of beaches there that are part of LA County. It's kind of like Miami. They call everything Miami, but it's really, there's different cities. Same thing with LA, right? Because you're in LA County, and then there's LA proper, the city. But he lived in Redondo. And so one day I went up, it was a Friday night, to go visit him with a bunch of friends. And of course, work was done. The work week was over, so we're all going to go out. And so he invited some friends and his neighbors. There were two girl roommates that lived next door that decided to come with us too. And we went down to the beach area, and we went to this kind of restaurant/bar, because at night it kind of turned into a bar and a club, and it was called the Red Onion. And we decided that's what we were going to do. So we hung out there. We were having fun. And then at one point during the evening, I find myself on the dance floor with a friend of mine and these two roommates, and we're just kind of having fun, enjoying the evening, and I don't really know what happened. I really don't. But all of a sudden, one of the girls, and she was shorter, but she was looked like she was a volleyball player, you know, kind of strong and everything else, and all of a sudden, she's in a fight with this other woman, and it was like this bigger Latino lady. And they're in a fight, and guys, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but women, when they physically fight, because they rarely physically fight, you normally see physical fights between men, but when women do it, it's like nasty. It's like pulling hair. I mean, there's clumps of hair. There is scratching, eye gouging, kicking. I mean, it's like two wild cats like going at it. And I was a little scared for this neighbor, and it's the first day I'd ever met her. I didn't even know her, but I felt like kind of we were together. So I'm like, I got to get this big lady off of her and just stop this. And so I kind of just said, I got to stop it, right? So I get in there, I grab the woman, and because she's flailing around, I don't want her to start attacking me because I'm scared and I have no face protection at this moment. I kind of get her into a headlock. And so I have her in a headlock, but she's really heavy, and she's like going like this. And now I thought when I pulled her off that the roommate would just leave, right? That she would just take off. But no, she stands there in a boxing position trying to hit the lady I'm holding. And I'm like moving her around. I'm like, get away, go away. And I'm trying to move. And as I would move, she would reposition. Now I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought, look at, I'm breaking up this fight. That's what it appeared like to me. But to all of her friends and the gang of friends in the audience, those that were dancing, those at the tables, it looked like I was holding this lady so my friend could beat her up. This scream. So the ladies all on the dance floor start screaming in this moment, and I don't know what's going on. The next thing I have two wildcats on top of me, and I just drop the other lady, and they're on me. They're pulling my hair. They're scratching my face. They're punching. They're attacking and kicking, and I'm not sure what to do. Okay, so I go into this kind of panic mode in a moment. And I just think I'm not going to hit a woman. You know, I'm not going to do that. So I just I scoop their legs, one each, underneath the leg. And I'm like, I'm going to pick up on this leg, get them off balance, and they'll fall back. That's what I'm thinking. And they're on me so tight. I mean, they're tangled into my hair. My hair was a little longer at the time. And as I pick them up a little bit, they kind of drift out. It opens up. And then I'm not sure what happened next. Something, I don't know what it was, the Hulk hit me on the head. And I find myself on my knees. So the boyfriends start coming in at this moment, and someone clubbed me right on the head, punched me really hard. I'm on my knees, and then they start kicking, and they don't stop. I'm like, they're kicking and scratching, and I got a sneaker to the face, and in a moment of panic, I thought, I need to curl up into a ball and hide. And then I thought, if I do that, I'm a dead man. And I don't know, there was this, this instinct, this life preservation thing kicked in, and all I could think of was, crawl as fast as you can out of here. And I just started going. Now the crowd, I don't know what happened. A brawl broke out. Everybody's fighting. My brothers both saw it. I had two brothers and my friends, other people. It's this giant brawl. I'm in the middle of it, kicking, punching, screaming. I'm crawling out from underneath the crowd. And I get up, and just in time, the bouncers all start descending upon the place, kicking people out, taking them out. And finally, I made it to the outside, got my friends, and got outside, and we're all like, oh my God. And we realized that, man, this could have been a gang of people, gang, like a literal street gang, who knows, and that our lives could have been in danger. And I'm beat up, scratched, my hair's like tossed like this, and we're all walking home talking. And the roommate starts saying, I could have taken that lady. I could have taken that lady. And I'm like, I know you've had a lot to drink, but honey, it looked like she was going to kill you. You were lucky I was there. That's all I could think. I'm like, I don't even know. I still have no idea why you guys were in a fight at all. I don't know. They bumped into each other. I don't know what happened. I mean, have you guys ever been into a fight? I mean, okay, well, maybe you've never been into a bar fight like that, like right in a street, like or something like that, but you've been into conflicts, right? We get in arguments with people all the time. There seems to be like there's no lack of conflicts in life, right? I mean, I see it with my kids constantly. I mean, it's a daily event that there's conflict with them. It's like somebody hit me, or this person pushed me, or they did this with my toy, or they took that, or they said something to me. I mean, it happens all the time. And I wonder why there's always conflict. Like, if everyone could just see things from my perspective and the way I see things, we would all get along, right? That there would be peace on earth. But the problem is that people don't see things the way I do. They have different perspectives, they have different preferences, they have different personalities, they have different backgrounds and experiences, they come from different environments and different cultures. I mean, I think we would all love to live down here on this giant ball of earth that's hurtling thousands of miles through space in peace, but it just doesn't happen. We experience conflict in our lives. And I think if the world could collectively just sit down around a giant bonfire and sing Kumbaya, we would all be happy. But that's not going to happen until Jesus comes back. I mean, like I said, we've all experienced conflict in our lives. Maybe as I was describing that situation of me in a restaurant getting beat up, and you're thinking, well, I recall something like that happening in my life, right? Or maybe you just recall an argument that you've had that got kind of heated. I mean, it goes all the way back even to elementary school. I remember one day my daughter came home and she goes, this kid keeps pulling my hair. And she's in like kindergarten. The kid, I don't know if he liked her or what, but she's pulling her hair. And like that's what happens. Somebody pulls one kid's hair. You go to the playground, fights break out, and this is just in grade school, elementary school. It happens in sports, right? In games, we watch games and it gets heated and the players get in a fight. And then we see the fans getting in a fight. I mean, you're not even on the field. Why are you getting into a fight? There are some objects of sports is to fight. You ever go to a hockey game? You remember the old joke? I went to the fights and a hockey game broke out, right? It seems like they're there just to fight. But we actually have sports where you do fight. We're boxing and MMA. That's the whole purpose of those two sports. But maybe we're not in those sports and we don't get into those type of fights, but I mean, we've probably gotten into a disagreement with our boss at work, right? Or maybe a coworker, and we just didn't get along for whatever reason, or we misunderstood something, and we don't really get along with them, or at least a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and you know why you're not dating the same person or married to the person that you were dating in high school? Because you got in a fight. You got in a disagreement at one point or another. Or a spouse or an ex-spouse, they're going to happen in our lives. Or a family member, there's that one family member maybe that you don't talk to, or you don't even like associating with, and you hate going to the holiday parties and seeing them there because you're worried about it, or you just don't want to hang out with them because of this. You see, conflict with other people causes so much unrest in our lives, right? After we have it, like after I got into that fight, I mean, I couldn't forget about it for a while. I kept thinking about it. I'm going over to my head, like I could have done something differently. I mean, it causes us to get worked up over whatever the issue is that's happening in our lives or the strife that we have between us. We say things that we didn't wish maybe in that moment, or we probably do things that we regretted. I mean, it can keep us up at night. It can consume our thoughts. It'll just steal our peace and consume so much of our time. And so if we could figure out how to deal with conflict, maybe in a better way than we have in the past, maybe then that we could work forward and move forward in our relationship in a better way. And we could reduce a lot of anxiety in our lives. So we're in the series, New Year, New You, that my wife spoke to you about, Leave the Old Life Behind. And this series is going to help us start the year off right because we're looking at some issues that are going to help us move forward and kind of leave the old person behind, those old habits that we had, the things that weren't working right in our life, and move forward, maybe move forward in our relationship with God or get to that place in our life where we're not recovering some of the same old ground. And so that we can have a better year, or it could be different than the one that came before it. And no matter what comes our way, no matter what this new year is going to bring us, because there's some things we can't control, but no matter what those come into our lives, if we can apply some of these new things we're learning, then we are going to have a better year. We're going to have a better life. And there's no better place to work on or thing to work on than dealing with conflict in our lives because it causes so much strife, so much problems. And there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to conflict and forgiveness in our lives, I think. Some take the point of view that we should just forgive only those people that ask for it, right? If they haven't asked for it, then we shouldn't forgive them. Or some believe that we should just forgive everybody. Let's just forgive them and move on and just turn the other cheek because that's what Jesus said. If someone slaps you on the face, then turn the other cheek so they can slap the other one. But that doesn't really help us deal with the pain, the hurt, and the loss. And ultimately, it's only half the story. And so today, I was hoping that we're going to get a little bit of perspective on a biblical point of view of how we should deal with conflict. Because it's such an important issue. You see, we're all going to deal with conflict every day. So the question really isn't, how are we going to deal with it? Or, how will we have conflict in our life? The question is really, how are we going to deal with it when it gets here? So Jesus actually gives us some pretty specific instructions on how to deal with conflict. And if you guys weren't aware of this, it's actually in Matthew chapter 18. And a lot of us have kind of read these verses and we kind of just skip over it, not realizing that Jesus is giving us the formula for dealing with conflict and forgiveness in our lives. And so we're going to start it off. It's in Matthew chapter 18. He says, Jesus, this is his words. I want you to know as we read this is Jesus talking. It's not somebody else interpreting what Jesus said. It's not somebody's, new improved way of dealing with your life. It's Jesus himself. He says, moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. So he starts off by saying this, that go directly to that person. Go privately and try to resolve it. Why? Because it's the first point in your outline, the outline that my wife referred to you in your program. If you pull it out and follow along and fill in, it's going to help you today remember the message and help you carry it with you. But it's keeping a matter private is the best way to resolve a conflict. So start with the best way. Jesus is saying, look, this is the best way. Try to resolve it just between you and them. You see, anytime we get into an argument or a disagreement, I know my first response is to try to justify my actions. Right? That's the first thing I'm thinking. I'm running over through my head like what I said, what they said, and why what I did was correct. I mean, it's just our human nature, right? You ever do that? You find yourself talking out loud like a crazy person, and then they said this, and I said this, and that's why I said this. And am I the only one who's crazy like that, or do you guys review your, okay, I see a couple heads shaking, so there's a few crazy ones here too. But we start with excusing ourselves when it comes to conflict. That's the first thing we want to do. And then the next thing we want to do is that we want to recruit others to agree with us. Don't we? I mean, we call our friend, listen, you aren't going to believe what just happened. And they said this, and I did this, and see? And we convince ourselves that we're looking for advice, but a lot of times we're just really recruiting someone who's going to see it from our side, someone who's going to back up our story or defend us. We end up calling that brother, that sister, our parents, somebody, a friend, and we're calling them up. We begin to talk to them, or maybe even a coworker in your life. Listen, this only ends up compounding the issue. You see, we're slowly destroying the person we're talking about, the person we got in a conflict. We call the other person, and we're kind of destroying this person's credibility in their mind because we're going to tell it from our side. We're going to tell them how we're right. We're going to tell them how the other person did what they did. And it starts to create what's called gossip. You see, Jesus right off the bat says, listen, we shouldn't be going talking to everybody about what's going on in your life, not right away, because it creates gossip in our lives. And it can end up causing discord. I've seen it in families so many times. my own family, where one person calls somebody else because of the issue that's going on between the two people. And then they spread it. And then I heard it third person, and I'm like, where'd you hear that? Well, my brother told my aunt, who told my cousin, who told his friend. You know, it's like, how many people? And then we heard a third person story. And now we're judging things that we don't even know how to judge. And you know, it happens in jobs, it happens in churches, especially in jobs and churches. You know, when there's strife between two people in a job, don't we stand around the water cooler talking about it? Instead of going directly to that person, we start talking about the boss and why what his decision is wrong and why this, that, and the other thing. Instead of going to the boss, knock on his door, can I have 10 minutes with you and speak directly to you? I've seen it destroy churches. Because what happens is we talk about what the pastor's doing or what there should have happened at this thing or that thing, and then we start telling another person instead of going directly to the pastor, and then they start to group together and form these opinions. This was my opinion in this group and this opinion, and eventually sometimes they can't even stay amicably in a church, and it breaks churches apart. It causes discord, and it can bring division. And that's why Paul, when he's writing, says this, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as it fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. Paul's saying, listen, don't go to the other person. Talk in a way that's uplifting. Talk in a way that builds up other people. I don't think that that's always our motive, to be honest, when we share with other people. Sometimes we're just frustrated. Sometimes we just want to get it off our chest. And we want to see the change, but we end up causing division that we had never intended to begin with. And it can cause in-laws to dislike other in-laws. I mean, there was a story of this husband and wife that got into a fight, and the wife called her mom, and he says, he fought with me again. I'm coming to live with you. And the mom replied, no, dear, he must pay for his mistake. I'm coming to live with you. Right? There's some relationships between in-laws that you don't want the in-laws living at your house. Right? Now, sometimes it's just personalities, but other times it's because far too often the spouse continues to go to the parent or somebody else in their family and tell them all the problems that they're having with the spouse. And it begins to build up this discord. And so they're like, well, you did this to my daughter. I remember that 5 years ago. And I remember this, and I remember that, and I remember that. And then there's no amicable relationship between in-laws. By the way, I have a great mother-in-law. She's awesome. But literally, if you really have to tell somebody, and you feel like you have to talk about it at this stage, the best thing to do is tell somebody that doesn't even know the person that you're talking about. Right? And you're like, well, I really have to tell them. All right, make sure they don't know him. And that makes it easier. See, Jesus said the first step is to go to that person between you and them alone. Resist the urge to tell somebody else. Go directly to the person with whom you have the issue. It's going to save you a lot of headaches. It's going to save you a lot of pain. And then he says after that, involve others, because he goes on. He says, but if he will not hear, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he refuses to hear them, tell it to the church. But if he refuses even to hear the church, let him be to you like a heathen and a tax collector. Assuredly, I say to you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, I say to you that if 2 of you agree on earth concerning anything that they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them. So he says to them, listen, take 1 or 2 people with you. If you've tried to resolve the issue and it's so big, then you need to bring somebody else into the picture. If it's a marriage and you've tried to resolve it, you're not able to, then maybe counseling is important to bring into that marriage so that you guys can have somebody else who will be the voice of reason, an outside voice to objectively help you with your situation. Or if it's someone at work and you've got to figure this out, maybe it's at that point, you're not getting along with your coworker and you've tried to resolve the situation. It's at that point that you go to the boss in the right way and say, listen, how can we resolve this issue? Not to go tell on them, not to go tell your story. Don't even start with the story until both of you are in the same room. Because Jesus here is implying an Old Testament principle that came from the law, how they were to govern their own people. This is what he says. It comes from Deuteronomy. He says, a lone witness is not sufficient to establish any wrongdoing or sin against a man. Regardless of what offense he may have committed, a matter must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. You couldn't just say, hey, that person did it, and we were all supposed to believe you. They're like, we need a couple witnesses here. So he says, using that, he quotes this verse, and he says, take somebody with you, and now go over the issue so they can be resolved. You see, this one sentence, this one idea actually appears in many different areas in the Bible. Jesus uses it in the Gospel of John. When the Pharisees come to him and say, like, you claim to be the Son of God. How can we believe in you? And he says, well, you remember that guy John the Baptist? Remember what he was doing? He was preaching about me. He was saying that I was the Son of God. Oh, that's one. Aside from my own voice, but how about this? The Holy Spirit, the works that I'm doing, the miracles that only God can do, that I do, that's the testimony of the Holy Spirit testifying to me as to who I am. Oh, and there's another one. When I got baptized, God's voice actually said, this is my Son in whom I'm well pleased. And he goes, look, I've got the witnesses, so you should be listening. So he's saying, look, I've got more than one. He just didn't come here on his own. And so there are people who come to me, by the way, for counseling for marriage. And I've had this happen many times at the other church, and people will start talking to me about issues that are going on. And I'll listen to everything that they have to say because they're trying to get some advice. They're trying to get a sounding board. And I usually say the same thing. You can't do marriage counseling with only one person, right? That can't happen. I'm not believing what you're saying, but I know this. There's 2 sides to every story, isn't there? Right? And if you only listen to one person, you're not going to hear the other perspective. You're not going to hear a whole bunch of facts that were left out. And you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense now why they're reacting that way, right? And so it's so important that we hear both sides of the story. And listen, as an outsider, guys, this is going to happen to you in your life, and it's happened to every single one of us because we've had that brother call us, we've had that sister call us, we've had that parent call us, we've had that friend or somebody else call us and ask us for advice on an issue. Resist the urge, I would say, or the temptation to listen to this person completely on what they've had to say alone. Because you're not going to hear the full story. You see, if you apply this to your life, it's going to save you countless moments of embarrassment. I know I've been embarrassed myself so many times from only listening to one person and only listening to one side. Then you step out and do it, and you're like, oh gosh, I didn't even know. It happens with my kids all the time. If I listen to just one of them, then I make myself a fool because I start handing out a consequence or doing something else, and then I find out the rest of the story. You see, we would learn so much if we could just apply these first 2 principles to our life. Imagine, by the way, and we've seen a lot of political strife in this last week, right? And I'm not trying to get political here, but imagine if we just applied these 2 principles, if our politicians would, if we would, before we just jump to conclusions about one article we read or one thing that was heard. And I'll get political here, and one unknown source that we listen to, right? The Bible says don't listen to just one source. We need to hear it from more than one person before we say, yeah, this is actually true. And so if we could do that, our whole life would begin to change. Our whole world would begin to change. You see, sometimes we misquote this verse, where 2 or more are gathered in our name, then God is amongst us, right, is in our midst. And we say it a lot when we're in prayer, and it's not totally wrong, to be honest, because God is present. But the truth is, when you pray alone, God's present too. The actual application of the verse in this context is he's trying to say this, that referring to Deuteronomy, that when 2 or 3 of you listen to this, so let's say 2 people, they're at an argument, they bring in 1 or 2 of you, and you're listening to the story, and then you make a judgment call on that, and you say, yeah, you know what, you were wrong, or hey, you both contributed, whatever it is. He says, when you're gathered and you do that, my stamp of approval is on it, because you're supposed to bring the witnesses in. And that's what he means. When 2 or 3 of you are gathered together, then I'm in your midst. I'm agreeing with that situation. I'm agreeing with whatever judgment was made there. And that's what he's trying to say. So he says, like, bring in more people, because don't just try to handle it yourself if you haven't been able to resolve it yourself. The goal, resolve it privately and on your own. Move forward. Go on with your life, because then more things get exposed when we involve others. But it's important to know this, because when they make a decision, it's very important to know this because of the second point in your outline, and that's this. Some conflicts require consequences. Some conflicts require consequences. You see, if we were only to go with, hey, forgive and forget and let's move on, then we'd be totally missing what Jesus is just about to tell us or has just told us in this situation. You see, there is this myth that we should forgive and forget. There's a difference between forgiveness and restoration, okay? And if you want to take notes, forgiveness is internal. Restoration is external, okay? And those are two different things. Notice that Jesus himself, because we were reading his words, and I emphasized this in the beginning, Jesus himself said this, that there's consequences if there's no resolution. He says, listen, treat them like a tax collector and a heathen. What did that mean? Well, we've talked about it last week. We've been talking about it last few weeks, but they were not supposed to associate with them. Jesus did because he came to save them, but in their context, in their culture, they weren't supposed to associate with them. So he says, look, if they won't, then you got to kind of treat them like that. You got to kind of treat them a little bit like an outsider. Doesn't mean you can't extend grace to them, but you probably shouldn't be treating them like you guys are all buddy-buddy. In fact, he says, kick them out is what he means of the congregation of the church. Paul uses later in 1 Corinthians where they have this situation where this guy is actually dating another guy's wife, and they're like, you got to get that guy out of there. If he doesn't listen to you, you actually have to tell him to leave the church. Why? Why? Because it's an opportunity to wake them up and help them repent. You see, a bunch of people have judged this situation and say, God, you're wrong. That person, and he won't wake up. He's like, oh, you got to do something drastic so that he will actually wake up to the idea, hey, maybe I am wrong. Maybe I did something wrong here. I know that one of the hardest things I've ever had to do was spank my son, Woody. And before, I don't spank him regularly. I rarely spank him. The girls I don't touch at all, by the way, just so you know, because I just don't think it's right for the man to hit a girl. I get my wife. If that's the case, I'm going to ask my wife. So I just want you to know that. But the son, he's a whole different story, okay? He's a different thing. But normally he has normal consequences, but there are on occasions. And this one time I actually had to employ this tactic because here we were at church, my other church. We dropped our kids off at the daycare. You know, we had the toddler room, we had the nursery room, we had different age groups, and he's in this toddler room. And at the end of the session of church, I come to pick him up, and the attendant says, look at your son bit another girl. They showed me her arm. She had bite marks still in her arm. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I thank God we knew the parents, you know, because it's just one of those dreaded things. You don't know them. And like, is he an animal? You know, what are you doing in your house? Like, you know, you get all these things, right? Thank God we knew them. And I'm like, look, we're so sorry. We had Woody apologize to the girl. He even got a consequence. I'm like, man, I just hope that's the end of that. But it didn't end. Then he bit my daughter, Gwendolyn. And Gwenny one day has a bite. And then Charlotte goes to comfort it one time. He's stressed out. He bites her right in the chest. And both times leaving these serious marks. And every time we made him apologize. Every time we gave him consequences. But I said, honey, we've got to stop this. We can't let this get, it's too dangerous for him to go around biting people like this. And so I said, honey, come with me. And we took him into the back room. And I said, Woody, man, I don't want to do this. But I can't have you biting people. It's too serious of a thing. And I said, every time you bite somebody, you're going to get 5 spanks on your butt. And I gave him those 5 spanks, and it was so painful. And I hugged him, and we cried a little bit, and, you know, the poor kid. And to be honest, he did it another time. And I had to do it again. But sometimes there has to be consequences. But after that, he stopped, by the way. He doesn't bite anymore. He's safe, okay? I just want you to know, if your kid's in the nursery, they're safe, okay? This was a few years back. But it took that for him to wake up, and sometimes that has to happen in our lives. See, listen to what God says about you and me. Go ahead, honey. He says, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord's disciplines the ones he loves, and he chastises everyone he accepts as a son. Go ahead. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. You see, sometimes we need to have consequences in order for that person to see that what they're doing is wrong. You know, a person can be forgiven. They can even be forgiven for the wrong. Woody was forgiven the moment that they apologized, the moment that they made up. My daughters forgave him. The other girl forgave him. We forgave him. But sometimes reconciliation, restoration requires something more. I see it so much in marriages when there's infidelity. And when I was at the other church, I was there for 19 years. I counseled so many different couples. And they come to you. It's usually when something has happened big, like infidelity. And they would be like, well, this person cheated on me. And they come for counseling because they don't know how to navigate their situation. I mean, how easy would it be for any of us, right? It's like, that happens in your life, it's devastating. And you're like, how do I fix this? How do I work this out if you're trying to move forward in that relationship? And so they're like, look, we're struggling here. And it usually goes something like this. The counseling kind of goes like this. The injured party, at one point, the one that was faithful, said they forgave the other person. Okay, because they wanted to work on the marriage. So I forgave you. But then there's still tension. There's still strife in the marriage. And the guy's coming home or the woman's coming home and they're like, well, I don't understand it. Why is there still tension here? Why do you always want to see my phone? Why is it that you don't trust me anymore? I thought you forgave me. And the person says, I did forgive you. I don't know why. And I'm like, I know why. Because forgiveness and restoration are not the same thing. Forgiveness and trust are two different things. And I kind of tell them a story. I kind of use this illustration to kind of help them. And I say this. I have to tell them the difference, right? I say, suppose I came to you and I said, can I borrow $200 from you? I'll pay you in 2 weeks. You're like, Pastor John, you seem like a trustworthy guy. Sure, here's $200. They give me $200. Well, 2 weeks go by and I haven't paid you. And you're thinking, well, maybe you just forgot. I'll give him another week or two, right? That time passes by, still haven't paid you. And you're thinking, well, this guy, he's good. Maybe he forgot. I'll tell him. So you tell me, hey, remember I lend you $200. Oh, yeah, I do remember. Look, I'm going to get that money to you. Don't worry about it. I'm going to get it. Can you just give me a week and then I'll get it to you? So a week goes by, still doesn't happen. Maybe this happens a couple times and you're getting frustrated by it. You're getting upset by it and you're like, you know what? This isn't worth it. It's just not worth it. Tell you what, I'm just going to forgive this loan. So you just come up to me one day and you look at it seems like you're struggling trying to pay me the money, whatever. So you don't owe me the money anymore. You're forgiven. You're good. We're good. And they're like, all right, thank you so much. Maybe 6 months go by and I come back up to you one day and I'm like, hey, I need $200. Can I borrow $200 from you? And you're like, no. But why not? I thought you forgave me. I did, but I'm not going to trust you with $200 again, right? We wouldn't. I forgave you. You don't owe me the pain. You don't owe me from the last time. You don't owe me anything, but I'm not going to trust you again because trust hasn't been restored. And that's the problem. We're in a marriage where someone's gotten hurt, and we're like, trust me again. And we're like, wait a minute, put on the brakes. And they don't understand it because they're like, I forgave you. But they don't understand that trust still needs to be restored. Restoration still needs to happen and for that relationship to be what it once was. And that's a process. And by the way, if you're ever in that situation, because you're like, well, how do you navigate that? The only one who can say when trust is restored is the person trust has been broken on. And so I'll sit them down and I'll say, what would it mean to you for trust to be restored? What do you need to see from this person? I want to see their phone. I want them to call me when they leave work. I want them to not ever disappear for 2 hours without calling me. And I'm like, do you think you can do this? Because I say to this person, the one that broke it, I say, listen, you had trust for free when you got married. When you said I do, it was free. You had it. It was yours. But once you broke it, now you got to earn it. Now you got to win it back. And so that's what happens in a relationship. We're using marriage as the illustration, but it happens all the time. It can happen when we mismanage money on someone else. It could happen when we do things that they're like, I don't know if you're going to do that again. It could happen when it comes to addictions or so many different areas of our life. You see, trust has to be reestablished sometimes, or whatever it is that's been broken has to be restored. You see, if we miss this third point, and this was Jesus' words, listen, there's consequences, right? He's saying you need to do this. If we miss this point, then we can put people in harm's way. And it happens, we just say, hey, go right back into it. And they go right back into it, and then it gets damaged again. And they're like, I don't understand why this keeps happening. I don't understand why my son or daughter keeps doing these things that we keep trying to have them not do. I don't understand why my spouse, my friends, my coworkers keep doing that because we've never got back to restoration. We didn't get back there, and we don't want to put people back into abusive situations where they could be hurt. Sometimes there are some very serious issues that people have gone through, and maybe you've gone through them. Abuses in your life, and we're like, hey, throw them back in, it should be okay. They said they're sorry. No. That's our fault. Because forgiveness can happen, but restoration may not happen. So what is forgiveness then? Well, Peter kind of listening to all this, and he's like, hold on a minute. Then Peter came to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Like this keeps happening. How much should I do it? And he says, up to 7 times? And Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 77 times, or 70 times 7, which is 490, right? Like that's an impossible number. He was really just saying, not when we hit the 500th time, it's over. He's just like, you got to keep doing it. Why? How does that work? Listen, this third point is this. Forgiveness is more about you than about them. We need to understand that forgiveness is more about us than the other person. It really is. Because restoration is about the other person. Forgiveness is about you and me. Restoration are the physical steps that the offender needs to do to restore the relationship. That's what restoration is. Forgiveness is the internal release of the offender on the part of the offended, right? Because we've all been hurt. Some of us have been hurt so seriously or very badly that it's been hard to get back, and the problem is we hold on to it. Forgiveness is about your and my heart. It's internal. It's not about restoration. It's not about consequences. It's the internal decision that you say to someone, you don't owe me for this anymore. And the willingness to seek restoration, right? Look, I'm not going to hold this against you. I know you did that. I know I lent you $200. You don't have to pay that to me again. You never even have to think about it again. That's what we say. I'm willing to talk again. I'm willing to restore trust if you're willing to go through that process. When I was 10 years old, I joined a baseball league, Little League. And probably many of you maybe have done that. And I wish I had more people influencing in my life because I was not that good. You know, my grandmother was trying to raise us. I didn't have a father showing me how to throw a ball or hit a baseball bat. And because it was a little bit political and I didn't have parents there inside the thing, we were like the last kids to be trained by the coaches and stuff. But I just remember the miserable experience of standing up at base during a game, right? And so I just they'd be like, oh gosh, Solar Rolly's up, you know? And they'd be like, the last words of my team and my coach were, just try to get on base. And I'm like, I know the object of the game here, okay? That's not the issue. And so I would be up there, and that ball would come. I'm hoping the guy's going to throw all balls, so at least I could get to the plate, and I had to be 1 strike, 2 strikes, and 3 strikes, you're out, right? We all know it. 3 strikes and you're out. I was giving it effort. I really wanted it. It wasn't for what was going on inside of me. I wanted it. But the problem is, I wanted another chance, but I didn't get it. And I'll tell you, when I was in the outfield, it was my turn out there. I'm like, swing, bada, 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 swing, and a miss. We're all doing it. You've heard the kids say that, right? You're like, go on, strike out, go to the bench, you're out of here. When it's other people up at the bat, that third one, get out of here. But when you're there, you want more, right? Isn't that true? Man, just give me more. Give me an extra chance. We've kind of, baseball has kind of revolutionized our thinking when it comes to like forgiveness. It's 3 strikes and you're out, right? You ever say that? That's 1. That's 2. All right, third one, I want nothing to do with you. That's what Peter's kind of saying. He's like, geez, how many times should I do this? 7 times? I'm being very generous, because when we played baseball back when I was a kid, back in the Hebrew school, then it was 3 strikes. I'm giving you more than that and an extra. They double it. And Jesus is like, no. No, don't do that. Because it's a hard issue. You see, you don't understand what's going on. It's not about them. It's not about them, whether they're worthy of it. It's not about them where you should give them, where they could earn it. It's about you and your heart. You see, what I want from God, and we've all been there when you've sinned, let's just all raise our hand. I'm just asking you to raise your hand. Everybody raise your hand, please. Everybody raise your hand. Okay, we're all sinners. You just raise your hand to say you're a sinner, okay? We're all in a level playing field right here. We've all sinned. We've all missed the mark when it came to God. And what do we want for Him? Please forgive me. Right? Forgive me, God. I was sorry. I didn't mean to do that. And I want it immediately. God, I want as many chances as I can get. But how do we treat others? They got to pay. Come on. You see what they did? You can't. My wife and I, our house got broken into one time. They took stuff. Man, the first thing I'm just like, that wasn't yours to take. Man, I hope the cops get him. I hope this happens. That's all we're thinking, right? I want you to understand the pain that I felt. I wish I could come into your house, steal your stuff, and see how you like it. That's what we want. We want them to identify with how we feel my pain, understand, and that's our attitude toward other people. And if we take an if-then approach, that's what we tend to do in our lives when it comes to forgiveness. If you would replace the thing that you've taken, then I'll forgive you. If you're going to show signs that you're repentant, let me believe it. Let me see it. I want to know it. Are you going to cry? Then I'll know maybe that you could be forgiven. If you apologize on your knees, kiss my hand, maybe bring me a box of chocolates, well, then maybe I'll forgive you. But forgiveness is not the same thing as restoration. It's a matter of your heart. And that's why Jesus says this. We're going to finish here. He says, therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And when he had begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. But as he was unable to pay, his master commanded that he be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and that payment be made. Now, 10,000 talents was more than this guy could earn in a lifetime. So the servant therefore fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I will pay you all, even though this guy didn't have any hope in the world of paying this back. And then the master of the servant was moved with compassion, and he released him and forgave the debt. But that servant went out and found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii, and that's just 100 days' work, wages. And he laid hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, Pay me what you owe me. So his fellow servant fell down at his feet and begged him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay you all. And he would not, but went and threw him into prison till he should pay the debt. So when his fellow servants saw what he had done, they were very grieved. And they came and told their master all that had been done. And then his master, after he had called him, said to him, You wicked servant, I forgave you all the debt because you begged me. Should you not also have compassion on your fellow servant, just as I had pity on you? And his master was angry and delivered him to the torturers until he should pay all that was due to him. So my heavenly Father also will do the same to each of you from his heart, if each of you from his heart does not forgive his brother his trespasses. I love what's there. Leave it on the screen for a moment. But he says, from his heart. Because we get a little confused because he tells the story about money. And this guy owes money, and this guy owes money. And it's not about the money. That's restoration. He's talking about from the heart, forgive from his heart. Because if this servant understood forgiveness when the master forgave him, he wouldn't be looking on at the other guy going, it's about money. It's about the debt. He would have been like, man, I can't believe what this guy did for me, and I need to do it to you. I need to do it from you because it's a heart condition. You see, Jesus' response to Peter, 70 times 7, he's basically saying every time. Every time. Because it's from your heart. You know, we have a hard time forgiving for fear that things are going to go back to the way they were, right? That's what restoration is for. And sometimes we skip the consequences that are necessary for that restoration. But the truth is, if we want, just like the forgiving master, we can say, hey, listen, you don't owe me that. If there's trust, if there's enough there. But other times, we just don't want to let go of the hurt. We don't want to let go of the pain. We want the offender to feel the same way that we felt. I need you to go through what I was going through, so we hold on to it and we don't let go. As a kid, one day I was playing with my friends, and we're in the backyard, and we had some like woods between us and the neighbors, and we were just picking up things and throwing them, and for some reason we were picking up sticks, and there was this board, like a thin, like 4x4 little board there, and I pick it up, and I'm like, I'm going to throw it into the woods, and I throw it. And I go like this, and it doesn't go anywhere. And I'm like waiting for the crash, but I didn't hear anything. And I look down, it's in my hand. So I go, and I throw it again, and nothing happens. So I'm like, that's weird. So I grab the board, and I pull it from my hand. It doesn't come out of my hand. There was a nail in the board. And when I picked it up, I didn't even realize it went right through my finger, the tip of my finger, and it was stuck to me. It had dug in. Can anyone say tetanus shot? You know, I had to go home. I had to get a head tetanus shot. I had to go to my mom, my grandmother. The Bible says this, listen. It says, strive for peace with everyone and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. You see, just like that board, when we don't have forgiveness, we get bit by something, and we just let it sit there. We just let that sit there. Can you imagine if I'm still holding that board today, by the way? If I came up here and you're like, John, that's really odd. What is that in your hand? I'm like, well, it's kind of stuck there. Probably it would have fallen off long ago because I would have gotten infected and gangrene would have set in, right? We would have been like, you still got that nail in that wound. And unforgiveness is kind of like leaving that nail in the wound. Like, you hurt me so bad, I'm not going to forgive you. Forgiveness is for you and me, for the one who's been offended, more so than the one who needs the restoration. Because that person, if their heart's in the right place, they'll come for the restoration, right? That'll happen in their lives. When we refuse to let go of something, it can dig in and take root in our lives in a very unhealthy way. When it continues to continually just sit there, cause us pain over and over, it takes root in our hearts and we become bitter, we become untrusting, our hearts become hardened, and none of us really wants to be that way. But the truth is, we've met people like that, haven't we? They become embittered to relationships, embittered to family members. I don't even talk to them. I don't associate with them. I won't even call them. Friends, that it was so easy because, man, we don't have to keep friends, right? We can just disappear. And we see how it's changed their attitudes. I've seen people that I don't want to ever date another woman again. Why? Well, because women are all like this. Because we're holding on to something we haven't let go of the forgiveness, because not every woman is like that. Not every man is like that. Not every family member is like that. Not every friend is like that. But what happens is when we leave that unforgiveness in our hearts, it starts to transform who we are. And that's not what God wants for you and me. God wants so much more for you and I. That's why he says, strive for peace with everyone. For that holiness, for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. It's going to be hard for you to see me. It's going to be hard for you to have the relationship with me that you desire if you're holding on to that nail, if you won't pull it out. Look, I don't know what you've gone through. Because you might be sitting there and saying, John, you have no idea what happened to me. We all have our own stories. I have a story of pain, of struggle. And to be honest, that story hasn't been resolved. Not all of it's been restored. But I've been able to say in my heart, I'm releasing it. You don't owe me anymore. You don't owe me any of those things. And that's what we need to come to. And I don't know where you're at today. Because you've gone through it. It's been painful. It's hurtful. But God wants to set you free. It doesn't mean because you forgive somebody that restoration has occurred. It doesn't mean that they're going to change. And maybe they don't even know they hurt you. And you're like, but God says, listen, I want you to be free from that. That's not the person that I created you to be. I created you to be free, to be able to love other people, to enjoy your life, because it's only going to hold you back. It's only going to hurt you. It's only going to be that thing that constantly, that is there, that you obsess over, that God says, listen, don't. Don't, because there's other relationships out there. There's other people out there. And I have those for you, but if you are locked up, I can't bring them in your life. You see, God wants you to be free today. And God led the way. God led the way for you and me when it came to forgiveness. I love this verse. I love this verse from the book of Romans. Paul's writing, he says, but God proves his love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. But we were still sinners. He didn't say, like, okay, if you come and you ask me to forgive you, if you somehow become worthy in some sense. He goes, no, you know what? I don't care. All the pain, all the things you did to my son, everything, I don't care. I'm forgiving you. I'm releasing you. And then it's on us to try to restore by receiving what God has given to you and me. God says, I want to set the example for you. I don't know who you are today. I don't know what you've gone through. I don't know the pains and the things and the horrific things that you've had to deal with, and the injustice, the hurt, the things that someone's done to you. But God, and I hope through this message you understand, God is saying, I want to release you. And it starts here. It starts here in this moment.